Chapter 12. Isfahan, Nasfud Jahan, is what the Persians of today say. Isfahan, half of the world. The expression came into use well after the age of Khayyam, but even in 1074 the city was exalted in words. Its stones are of galenite, its flies or bees, its grass is saffron. Its air is so pure and healthy that its granaries do not change according to any calendar, and flesh does not decompose. It is true that the city lies at an altitude of 5,000 feet, but Isfahan also had 60 caravansaries, 200 bankers and money changers, and endless covered bazaars. Its workshops produced silk and cotton. Its carpets, cloths, and padlocks were exported to the most distant countries. Its roses blossomed in 1,000 varieties, and its opulence was proverbial. This city, the most populous in the Persian world, attracted all those who were seeking power, fortune, or knowledge. I have said this city, but one cannot really speak of a city. They still tell the story there of a young traveler from Rai who was in such a hurry to see the wonders of Isfahan that on the last day he galloped ahead of his caravan. After several hours he came to the bank of Zainadur-Rad, the life-giving river, and followed it until he reached a wall of earth. The town seemed to him to be of respectable size, but smaller than his own city of Rai. When he reached the gate, he asked the guards, "This is the city of J," he was told. He did not so much as go in, but turned and followed his route towards the west. His mount was exhausted, but he did not spare the crop. Soon he found himself panting at the gates of another city, more imposing than the first, but scarcely larger than Rai. He questioned an old passerby. "This is Yehudiya, the Jews' town." "Are there so many Jews in this country?" "There are some, but most of the inhabitants are Muslims, like you and I. The town is called Yehudiya because King Nebuchadnezzar is supposed to have settled here the Jews he deported from Jerusalem. Others claim that it was the Jewish spouse of a Persian Shah who, before the age of Islam, had members of her community brought here. God alone knows the truth." Our young traveler thus turned away, determined to follow his route even if his horse were to collapse between his legs, when the old man called to him, "Where are you trying to get to, my son?" "To Isfahan." The old man burst out laughing. "Has no one ever told you that Isfahan does not exist?" "What do you mean? Is it not the largest and most beautiful city of Persia? Was it not in the distant past the proud capital of Artaban, king of the Parthians? Have its wonders not been extolled in books?" "I do not know what the books say, but I was born here 60 years ago, and only foreigners have ever spoken to me of the city of Isfahan. I have never seen it." This was hardly any exaggeration. The name Isfahan had for a long time not designated a city but an oasis where there were the two distant cities of Jay and Yehudiya, which were separated from each other by an hour's journey. It was not until the 16th century that they and the surrounding villages formed a real city. In Khayyam's day, it did not exist yet, but a wall had been built, 3 parasangs or 12 miles long, to protect the whole oasis. Umar and Hassan arrived late in the evening. They found lodgings in Jay, in the caravansary near the Tirah gate. There they stretched out, and before they could exchange a single word, they started to snore in unison. The next day, Khayyam went off to see the Grand Vizier. In the square of the money changers, Andalusian, Greek, and Chinese travelers and merchants, amongst others, were milling around the money changers who, appropriately equipped with their statutory scales, were scratching a kirman, nishabur, or Sevilla dinar, sniffing a delhi tanka, feeling the weight of the Bukhara dirham or pulling a face at a recently devalued numisma from Constantinople. The gateway of the Diwan, the seat of government and the official residence of Nizam al-Mulk, was not far off. The musicians of the Noba were stationed there to sound their trumpets 3 times a day in honor of the Grand Vizier. In spite of all this pomp, everyone, down to the most humble widow, was granted permission to venture into the Diwan, the huge audience hall, in order to expose their tears and grievances to the strong man of the empire. It was only there that guards and chamberlains made a circle around Nizam, questioned the visitors, and sent away the nuisances. Umar stopped in the doorway. He examined the room, its bare walls and its 3 layers of carpet. He greeted those present with a hesitant gesture. They were a mixed but contemplative group who surrounded the vizier, who was in conversation for time being with a Turkish officer. Out of the corner of his eye, Nizam had spotted the newcomer. He smiled at him in a friendly manner and signaled to him to be seated. 5 minutes later, he came over to him and kissed him on both cheeks and then on the forehead. "I have been waiting for you. I knew that you would be here on time. I have much to say to you." He then led him by the hand away from everyone into a small antechamber where they sat down side by side on an enormous leather cushion. "Some of what I'm about to say will surprise you, but I hope that when it all is said and done, you will not regret having responded to my invitation." Could anyone ever regret having entered through Nizam al-Mulk's gateway? "That has happened," murmured the vizier with a savage smile. "I have raised men up to the skies, and I have brought others low. Every day I dispense life and death. God will be the judge of my intentions. He is the source of all power. He granted the supreme authority to the Arab Khalif, who ceded it to the Turkish Sultan, who has delivered it into the hands of the Persian vizier, your servant. Of others, I demand that they respect this authority, but of you, Khawaja Umar, I demand that you respect my dream." "Yes, I dream of making this huge country of mine into the most powerful, prosperous, stable state, into the best policed state in the universe. I dream of an empire where every province and city will be administered by a just and God-fearing man who pays heed to the groans of his weakest subjects. I dream of a state where the wolf and the lamb will drink peacefully together, in complete peace, water from the same brook. However, it is not enough for me merely to dream. I am building. Go and walk about in the districts of Isfahan, and you will see regiments of workers digging and building, and artisans going about their work. Hospices, mosques, caravansaries, citadels, and seats of government are being built everywhere. Soon, every important city will have its own large school which will carry my name, a madrasa nizamiya. The one in Baghdad is already in operation. I drew up its plans with my own hands. I established its curriculum. I chose the best teachers for it, and I have allotted a grant for every student. You see, this empire is one large building site. It is rising up, expanding, and prospering. Heaven has allowed us to live in a blessed age." A light-haired servant came in and bowed. He was carrying 2 goblets of iced rose syrup on an engraved silver tray. Umar took one. As he raised it, his lips felt its icy steam, and he decided to sip it slowly. Nizam finished his off in one gulp and continued, "Your presence here gladdens and honors me." Khayyam wanted to reply to this rush of amiability, but Nizam stopped him with a gesture. "Do not think that I am trying to flatter you. I am so powerful that I need only sing the praise of the Creator. However, you see, Khawaja Umar, as far-flung, as populated, or as opulent as an empire may be, there is always a shortage of men. In appearance, what a lot of creatures, how teeming the streets are, what dense crowds. But when I chance to look upon the deployment of my army, or at a mosque at prayer time, a bazaar, or even my diwan, I have to ask myself, if I were to demand some wisdom, knowledge, loyalty, or integrity from these men, would I not, at the mention of each quality, see the throng thin out, then melt and disappear? I find myself alone, Khawaja Umar, desperately alone. My diwan is empty, as is my palace. This town and this empire are empty. I always feel that I have to clap with one hand behind my back. I am content with sending for men like you to come from Samarkand. I myself am ready to go on foot to Samarkand to fetch them. Umar murmured a confused, God forbid, but the vizier did not stop. Those are my dreams and my worries. I could speak to you of them for days and nights, but I want to listen to you. I am impatient to know if this dream moves you in some way, if you are ready to take your rightful place at my side. Your projects are exhilarating, and I am honored by your faith in me. What do you require in order to work with me? Tell me frankly, the way I have spoken to you. You will obtain everything you desire. Do not be timorous, and do not let my moment of rash prodigality pass by. He laughed. Khayyam managed to cover his utter confusion with a weak smile. My only desire is to be able to carry on my humble works sheltered from need. My greed goes no further than having something to drink, clothing on my back, and shelter for the night. By way of shelter, I offer you one of Isfahan's most beautiful houses. I myself resided there while this palace was being built. It will be yours, with its gardens, orchards, carpets, servants, and maidservants. For your expenses, I am allotting you a pension of 10,000 royal dinars. As long as I am alive, it will be paid to you at the beginning of every year. Is it sufficient? That is more than I need. I shall not know what to do with such a great sum. Khayyam was being sincere, but this irritated Nizam. When you have bought all the books, had all the jars of wine filled, and all your mistresses covered with jewels, you will distribute alms to the poor, finance the Mecca caravan, and build a mosque in your name. Realizing that his detachment and the modesty of his demands had displeased his host, Umar made bold. I have always wanted to construct an observatory with a large stone sextant, an astrolabe, and various instruments. I would like to measure the exact length of the solar year. Granted, by next week funds will be allotted to you for that end. You will choose the site, and your observatory will be erected within a few months. But tell me, is there nothing else that would give you pleasure? By God, I want nothing more. Your generosity overwhelms me. Then perhaps I, in my turn, might formulate a demand for you. After what you have just granted me, I will be only too glad to be able to show you a small part of my immense gratitude. Nizam did not hesitate. I know that you are discreet and little inclined to gossip. I know that you are wise, just, impartial, and in a position to discern the truth from the false in everything. I know that you are trustworthy. I would like to charge you with the most delicate commission of all. Umar waited for the worst, and indeed it was the worst which was in store for him. I name you Sahib Khabar. Sahib Khabar, me, the head spy, head of the empire's information. Do not respond in haste. It is not a question of spying on good people or infiltrating the homes of believers, but of looking after the peace for everyone. In a state, the least coercion or injustice must be brought to the attention of the sovereign and quelled in an exemplary fashion, whoever the guilty party may be. We can only learn if some Qadi or provincial governor is exploiting his office to enrich himself at the expense of the weak by means of our spies, since the victims do not always dare to complain. These spies could still be bought off by the Qadis, the governors, or the emirs, or become their accomplices. Your role, the role of the Sahib Khabar, is precisely to find incorruptible men for these assignments. If these incorruptible men exist, would it not be simpler to appoint them governors or Qadis? It was a naive observation, but to Nizam's ears it sounded mocking. He became impatient and arose. I have no wish to debate this issue. I have told you what I am offering you and what I expect of you. Go and think over my proposal. Weigh up the arguments on both sides calmly and return tomorrow with your response. Chapter 13. That day Khayyam was no longer capable of reflecting, weighing up or evaluating. After leaving the diwan, he disappeared into the narrowest alley of the bazaar, meandered past men and beasts, and made his way under the stucco vaults between mounds of spices. At each step the alley became a little darker, and the crowd seemed to be moving sluggishly and speaking in murmurs. Merchants and customers were masked actors and sleepwalking dancers. Umar groped his way along, now to the left, now to the right, afraid of falling down or fainting. Suddenly he came upon a small square which was flooded with light, a clearing in the jungle. The harsh sun beat down on him. He straightened up and breathed. What was happening to him? He was being offered a paradise which was shackled to hell. How could he say yes? How could he say no? How could he face the Grand Vizier or leave town with any dignity? To his right, a tavern door was half open. He pushed it and went down a few steps strewn with sand and came out into a dimly lit room with a low ceiling. The floor was damp earth, the benches looked unsteady and the tables unwashed. He ordered a dry wine from Qum. It was brought to him in a chipped jar. He breathed it in for a long while with shut eyes. The blessed time of my youth passes by. I pour out the wine of my oblivion. Bitter it is, and thus it pleases me, for this bitterness is the zest of my life. Suddenly, however, an idea occurred to him. He doubtless had had to come to this sordid den to find it. The idea had been waiting for him there, on that table, at the third mouthful of the fourth goblet. He settled his bill, left a generous bakshish, and resurfaced. Night had fallen. The square was already empty, with every alley of the bazaar closed off by a heavy portal, and Umar had to make a detour to get back to his caravanserai. Hassan was already asleep, his face severe and pained, as Khayyam tiptoed into his room. Umar contemplated him for a long while. 1,000 questions ran through his mind, but he brushed them aside without trying to find answers. His decision was taken, and it was irrevocable. There is a legend common in the books. It speaks of 3 friends, 3 Persians who marked, each in his own fashion, the beginnings of our millennium. Umar Khayyam, who observed the world, Nizam al-Mulk, who governed it, and Hassan Sabbah, who terrorized it. They are said to have studied together at Nishabur, which cannot be correct since Nizam was 38 years older than Umar, and Hassan carried on his studies at Rai, and perhaps a little in his native town of Qum, but certainly not in Nishapur. Is the truth to be found in the Samarkand manuscript? The chronicle which runs along the margins asserts that the three men met for the first time in Isfahan in the diwan of the Grand Vizier on the initiative of Khayyam, acting as destiny's blind apprentice. Nizam had secluded himself in the palace's small hall and was surrounded by papers. As soon as he saw Umar's face in the doorway, he understood that his response would be negative. So you are indifferent to my projects? Khayyam replied, contrite but firmly. Your dreams are grandiose, and I hope that they will be realized, but my contribution cannot be what you have proposed. When it comes to secrets and those who reveal them, I am on the side of the secrets. The first time an agent came to me to report a conversation, I would order him to be silent, state that it was neither my business nor his, and I would ban him from my house. My curiosity about people and things is expressed in a different way. I respect your decision and do not deem it useless for the empire that some men devote themselves completely to science. Naturally, you will still receive everything I promised you, the annual sum of gold, the house, the observatory. I never take back what I have given of my own accord. I would have wished to be able to associate you more closely with my work, but I take consolation in the fact that the chronicles will write for posterity that Umar Khayyam lived in the era of Nizam al-Mulk, and that he was honored, sheltered from bad weather, and was able to say no to the Grand Vizier without risking disgrace. I do not know if I will ever be able to show the gratitude which your magnanimity deserves. Umar broke off. He hesitated before continuing. Perhaps I may be able to make you forget my refusal by presenting to you a man I have just met. He is a man of great intelligence, his knowledge is immense, and his genius is disarming. He seems just right for the office of Sahib Khabar, and I am sure that your proposal will delight him. He conceded to me that he had come from Ray to Isfahan with the firm hope of being employed by you. An ambitious man, Nazim murmured between his teeth. But that is my fate. When I find a trustworthy man, he lacks ambition and scorns the apparatus of power. And when a man appears ready to jump at the first office I offer him, his haste unnerves me. He seemed tired and resigned. By what name is this man known? Hassan, son of Ali Sabbah. I must warn you, however, that he was born in Qum. A Shiite missionary. That does not worry me, even though I am hostile to all heresies and all deviations. Some of my best collaborators are sectarians of Ali. My best soldiers are Armenians, and my treasurers are Jews. But that does not mean that I withhold my trust and protection from them. The only ones I distrust are the Ismailis. I do not suppose that your friend belongs to that sect. I do not know. However, Hassan has come here with me. He is waiting outside. With your permission, I will summon him, and you will be able to question him. Umar disappeared for a few seconds and came back accompanied by his friend, who did not appear in the least intimidated. However, Khayyam could make out two muscles in Hassan's beard, which were flexing and shaking. I present Hassan Sabah. Never has such a tightly wound turban held such knowledge. Nizam smiled. Here I am surrounded by the learned. Is it not said that the prince who frequents and keeps the company of scholars is the best of princes? It was Hassan who retorted. It is also said that the scholar who keeps the company of princes is the worst of scholars. An unaffected but brief laugh drew them together. Nizam was already knitting his brows. He wanted the inevitable series of proverbs which preceded any Persian conversation to be over quickly, in order to make clear to Hassan what he expected of him. Curiously enough, from the very first words they found themselves in collusion. It now only remained for Umar to slip away. Thus Hassan Sabah very quickly became the indispensable collaborator of the Grand Vizier. He had succeeded in setting up an elaborate network of agents disguised as merchants, dervishes, and pilgrims who crisscrossed the Seljuk Empire, not letting any palace, house, or bazaar out of their earshot. Plots, rumors, and scandals were all reported, exposed, and thwarted in either a discreet or an exemplary manner. At first, Nizam was overjoyed at having the fearsome machinery under his control. He elicited some satisfaction from the Sultan, who had previously been reticent. Had not his father, Alp Arslan, recommended that he abhor this type of politics? When you have planted spies everywhere, he had warned, your true friends will not be on their guard since they know that they are loyal. But the felons will be on the lookout. They will want to bribe the informers. Gradually, you will start receiving reports which are unfavorable to your true friends and favorable to your enemies. Good or bad words are like arrows. When you fire many, there is always one which hits its target. Your heart will then be hardened against your friends, the felons will take their place at your side, and what will be left of your power? It needed a woman from the harem to be caught in the act of poisoning someone to make the Sultan stop doubting the usefulness of his chief of spies, and overnight he made him his confidant. However, it was Nizam who took umbrage at the friendship which sprang up between Hassan and Malik Shah. The two men were young, and they would happily chat together at the expense of the old vizier, particularly on Fridays, the day of the Sholen, the traditional banquet held by the Sultan for his court. The first part of the festivities was strictly formal and restrained. Nizam was seated to the right of Malik Shah. They were encircled by men of letters and intellectuals, and discussions took place on the most varied of subjects, from the comparative merits of Indian or Yemenite swords, to the various works of Aristotle. The Sultan fleetingly showed a passion for this sort of sparring, then he faded out and his eyes started to wander. The vizier understood that it was time to leave, and the noble guests followed him. They were instantly replaced by musicians and dancers. Jugs of wine were tipped, and the drinking bout, which would be restrained or wild accordingly to the humor of the prince, would continue into the morning hours. To a couple of chords from the rebeck, the lute, or the tar, singers improvised on their favorite theme, that of Nizam al-Mulk. The Sultan, who was incapable of doing without his Grand Vizier, avenged himself by laughing freely. One just had to see the infantile frenzy with which he clapped to know that one day he would manage to hit out at his father. Hassan was adept at feeding the sovereign's very sign of resentment towards his vizier. Upon what did the vizier pride himself? His wisdom? His learning? But Hassan could make short shrift of both these qualities. The vizier's capacity to defend the throne and the empire, Hassan very quickly had shown himself equally competent. The vizier's constancy, there was nothing simpler than to affect loyalty, which anyhow never rings truer than in the mouths of liars. Above all, Hassan knew how to cultivate Malik Shah's proverbial avarice. He constantly spoke to him of the vizier's expenses and brought to his attention the new robes of the vizier and his associates. Nizam liked power and its apparatus, but Hassan liked only power and was rigorous in its pursuit. When he felt that Malik Shah was totally won over and ready for his eminence Greece to be delivered the death blow, Hassan created the incident. The scene unfolded in the throne room one Saturday. The Sultan had woken up at midday with an annoying headache. He was in a foul temper and became exasperated upon learning that 60,000 golden dinars had just been distributed to the soldiers of the vizier's Armenian guard. The information had to have come from Hassan and his network. Nizam patiently explained that in order to avoid any hint of insubordination, he had to feed the troops and fatten them up a little. and that if the troops reached the point of rebellion, the state would have to spend that amount 10 times over. Throwing gold around by the armful, retorted Malik Shah, meant that they would end up not being able to pay salaries, and then the real rebellions would begin. A good government surely had to know how to keep its gold for the difficult times. One of Nizam's 12 sons, who was present during the scene, thought it clever to intervene. During the early days of Islam, when the Caliph Umar was accused of spending all the gold that had been amassed during the conquest, Umar asked his detractors, "Is this gold not the bounty of the Almighty who lavished it upon us? If you believe God is incapable of granting any more, then spend none of it. As for me, I have faith in the infinite generosity of the Creator and will not keep in my coffer a single coin which I could spend for the welfare of the Muslims." Malik Shah, however, had no intention of following this example. He was mulling over an idea of whose merits Hassan had convinced him. He ordered, "I demand to be presented with a detailed summary of everything which goes into my treasury and the precise way that it is spent. When can I have it?" Nazim seemed overwhelmed. "I can provide this summary, but it will take time." "How long, Khawaja?" He had not said Ata but Khawaja, a very respectable title, but in this context so distant that it sounded very much like a repudiation or a prelude to disgrace. Distraught, Nazim explained, "An emissary will have to be sent to every emir to carry out long calculations. By the grace of God, the empire is immense, and thus it would be difficult to draw up this report in less than 2 years." Hassan, however, approached solemnly. "I promise our master that if he provides me with the means, if he orders all the papers of the diwan to be put into my hands, I will present him a completed report in 40 days. The vizier wanted to respond, but Malik Shah had already arisen. He strode towards the door and raised his voice. "Very well. Hassan will be installed in the diwan. The whole secretariat will be under his orders. No one will enter without his permission. In 40 days' time, I will conclude the matter."